Today we're here with Aaron Bennett, one of the most interesting people on earth and also the owner of Hack Nation. He just so happens to also be my dad. I want to start with Alaska. What was that about? You fucking hunked up at like 18 and jumped on a plane and moved to Alaska. Where'd you get that bright idea?
You have to rewind just a little bit. And of course, we're not here to get my entire life story, so I'll try and keep it brief. But I was raised in a family of 10 kids from the same mom and dad, so a family of 12. And we were technically homeschooled, which when you have that many kids running around and running a family business, what you end up with is no schooled. So when I was, becoming a man, 17, 18 years old, I was looking around me, and I grew up in Idaho, out in the country in Idaho. The closest town to us only had 23 people. So here I am, coming into being a man, trying to figure out what I'm going to do with my life. And I had heard from friends of mine that they knew people that had went and made a fortune in Alaska fishing. And so I decided to go find out. And I didn't have any contacts. I didn't know how to get a hold of anybody up there. So I got on an airplane and literally just flew into Kodiak Island and kind of walked around, and within minutes I had a job. And if you know anything about that industry, there's a massive manpower shortage. So it was not hard for me to get a job, and I went out on a fishing boat, and I fished all around Kodiak Island. I fished for 3 months straight, and by the time I got off the boat, I owed the boat money. But it was the awesomest adventure of my life. Made some really good friends that were my shipmates, and overcame a lot of challenges out there that I didn't even know I was capable of. Some of those were piloting a boat that was too old to have a proper GPS plotting system, so everything was done by charts and by radar, which came in handy later on in life. So I had to learn how to navigate, not like a Viking, so to speak, but, definitely without technology.
Well, boats, it seems like they're always about 50 years behind the times. Because people don't want to buy a brand new boat.
We were probably the only boat out there that did not have an actual GPS tracking system on it, to be honest with you. So I never fished on another boat after that wasn't equipped, modernly equipped. But I'm glad that I started on a boat, because everybody has to drive, and it didn't take the skipper very long to realize that I was the most competent guy on his boat. And so he would delegate. Basically, it was just him and I. We would drive the boat, and going around the Horn of Kodiak there is notoriously dangerous, and I got to navigate that. And I did all of that by using a chart and a ruler. So, I didn't want to get too carried away on all that part. But, that first boat taught me a lot and carried me on to my next adventures. But once my 3-month stint got over, I flew back home to Idaho, sat around for about a month, and realized that Alaska was the place for me. And because I realized after mingling around up there for a little bit that was a place in the world where a blue-collar guy could still make a fortune and literally pull himself up by his bootstraps. And so, that wasn't available for me in Idaho, and it's still not available for most people today. So I got on, I talked a good friend of mine into, hey, Alaska's the coolest place ever. And we took his pickup and we drove back up to Alaska together. Unfortunately, we went up there at a very horrible time. It was coming into winter, like November, December type time. And for Alaska, that's already like dead of winter. So when we got there, it was pretty much impossible to find a job. And it didn't take me very long when I was literally living on the street. And kind of a funny story there. When I was living on the street, the way that I would accommodate myself and feed myself is, I'd do odd things to try and get money. But what I would do is go to Denny's, because back then you could get something called a Grand Slam, and it was $3. For $3, you could get an egg, a piece of bacon, and a pancake, I think it was, for $3. So I would go there every night once it got too late to be roaming the streets. and I would get the Grand Slam. I would eat one of them, and that would buy me probably 4 or 5 hours, and I would just sleep right there in the booth. And then they'd come wake me up and tell me that I needed to leave, and I would say, oh, no, I'll just take another Grand Slam. So they'd bring me another Grand Slam. So it cost me about $6 a night to sleep. And so every day I had to figure out how I was going to get $6 more. And, so I had a place to sleep and something to eat. And that's how I kind of navigated my way through, being there for 3 or 4 weeks. And I got a job. I finally got a job somewhere, and it was a hotel that had a restaurant. Because I was making friends, outgoing guy. I was making friends and stuff. It's not like I was me against the world, 100%. I started to meet people and this and that. And one of my friends was like, hey, I work over here at this restaurant. And so this is my only stint in the service and the food service industry. But I went over there and got a job as a waiter for tables, and that lasted about 3 days. I found out that's not my calling. There's just something about me that doesn't do well when people start to be an asshole to me. And so there was a family there, and I had brought, they had ordered, and it'd only been like less than a minute, and I came back by, and this is a very well-to-do restaurant, and so the lady called me over there, and she's like, how long is our food going to take? And I said, well, it's only been a minute since you ordered, like literally 1 minute. And she's like, that's not what I asked you. And I was like, well, how about you go fuck yourself? And so her husband started to say something to me. So I just grabbed the table and pushed it over on top of him, and I lost my job. So that wasn't the career for me by any stretch of the imagination. But that was in the middle of the day. It was actually Easter Sunday or something like that. I can't remember, but yeah, that was in the middle of the day. I might not have all my timelines 100%, but I remember there was some kind of event like Easter or something. There's a lot of people at the restaurant. And on my way home, on my way back to where I like to hang out, more like, I was catching buses, and I saw a construction company as I was on that bus, and I pulled the hooter, and they pulled over. I was on the poor man's limousine. Jumped out, ran over that job site, found the owner, and I was like, hey, give me a job. And so he did. He gave me a job, and I obviously leaned into that job really hard. Got a little bit of money, and I rented I found a place for rent. What it ended up being was a utility closet, but I couldn't afford it by myself because I just started this job. So I convinced 2 of my friends that they weren't homeless, but they lived at home and they didn't want to, so they were pretty excited at the concept. And we moved into this literal utility closet together. They had put a toilet in it, and that's all it had. And we put one queen-size mattress in it. And so you had like a 3-foot section you could stand and dress and this and that, but we had a queen-size mattress, and all 3 of us boys would sleep on that mattress together. And I lived there with them for 2 months while I was saving up money, and I was still riding the loser cruiser, the poor man's limousine to get to work and this and that, which is the bus, in case anybody doesn't know what that is, until I could get together enough money to get a proper place, and then I made good friends with a guy on the job site, and he started picking me up and this and that. But that's how I got my start in Alaska. Started getting my feet under me and get running. But what I was really doing was biding my time until the next time I could go fishing. And by the time I was really getting my foot in the door with this construction company, breakup was happening, and it was fishing time. And if you don't know anything about fishing, I said it earlier, there's a massive manpower shortage when it comes to fishing. So if you go one time and you last the whole season, you're kind of like a shoe-in anywhere you want to fish, right? I just had to get that first time behind me, because that's the hardest part, is getting guys that will stay, not getting guys to come, right? So I had a reputation just for a guy that sticks it out.
Why do they have such a hard time keeping people there?
Because it's the most dangerous fucking job on planet Earth. Not only that, it's also one of the most physically demanding jobs you'll ever do in your life. And the last thing is it's very... So imagine you take 4 to 6 guys and cram them into a small camper, and they live together for anywhere from 4 to 5 months, and they work, eat, sleep, cook, clean, wash, everything is all done in a compact size. It ain't for the faint of heart, brother. It ain't for the faint of heart. And you're doing the most, it's considered one of the most dangerous jobs in the world. I can tell you firsthand, it certainly is. It's high intensity. One of the main.
To put it into perspective, what was the scariest thing you've seen out there?
Well, I'd like to explain why it's so dangerous. Yeah, besides the fact that you're on the ocean, you're in these little tiny boats, so to speak, and they're going way out there and trying to catch fish. But the main reason it's so dangerous is because of the government. The Fish and Game will count fish or whatever they do, and then they'll get to a certain quota and they'll open it, right? And so they basically announce over the radio that you can go ahead and go fish. And you don't know how long they're going to let you fish for. They'd never tell you in advance. That might be 1 day, it might be 3 days. And so because it's open-ended, when they decide to close it, everybody fishes without ceasing, right? And so let's say we're day number 3 into fishing, and we don't have a clue if the government's going to close the fishing. And when they close it, they'll close it for 3 or 4 days, and then they open it again, right? Everybody's trying to make their money in those little 2 to 3 day openers. Maybe it's only open for a day. I've seen it be open before we didn't even make it to where we're going to fish, and they closed it, So everybody's in a mad rush to get their nets in the water and work their ass off. Well, you got to imagine you're into day number 3. It's not like you've got a fresh crew. So you have guys that haven't slept in 72 hours or however long they haven't slept, and they're working 24 hours a day, right? And then that's when people start to get killed, is because their brains aren't working correctly, and you're dealing with all kinds of pulleys and ropes with mass amounts of tension on them on a rolling ocean, and you have every boat has a skiff, because when I was doing purse seining, that's trying to hold the boat into the waves correctly, and everybody's falling, and there's lines going all over the place, and people get killed. And the more tired people get, the more propensity they have to get killed. So I had a lot of close calls. I've been thrown off boats 2 different times by lines coming across and grabbing me and throwing me off the boat. That's I was lucky that both times it was a simple recovery, but that's a really easy way to quickly lose your life. So I did that for 5 years. I would fish. I would do anywhere from a 3 to 5 month fishery, and I would go home, and I worked for the same construction company every single time. That man grew to love me, and likewise, he mentored me in my young adulthood. The construction company I worked for, the man's name was Roger Ashcraft, and he was a very, very hardcore man. But when I look back now, most of my business practices, as far as in-house business practices, came from him mentoring me. And the value of that, I would never give back for anything. So the scenario is I'm fishing, and then I'm back doing construction, and fishing, and back doing construction, and I would just save all my money, right? In fact, I saved most of it in a backpack until I couldn't stuff any more in it, quite literally.
Was there anything that's helped you in business that you learned on the boat?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had immense respect for the captains, every captain I ever served under, because it seemed like I was one of the few people that realized that those guys were making split-second decisions around the clock under extremely stressful and dangerous situations, and I trusted them impeccably because they had my life in their hands, and those guys that had my life in their hands got me home safe, and I realized that when you're in a leadership role, it's impossible to make the wrong decision. You have to make a decision. So you can't think about the wrong decision. So I got to hang out with guys for 5 years straight that, whether they knew they were mentoring me or not, and in some of the most dangerous situations on planet Earth, where you could end up with PTSD from it, these guys are making split-second decisions on the fly with everybody's lives in their hands. And that made me realize that you cannot compromise. The best captain I ever had would not let anybody tell him anything. And it wasn't because he was an arrogant asshole. It's because he had all of our lives in his hands. And he couldn't afford for anyone to question his split-second decisions. Everybody had to obey immediately. And if they didn't, somebody could get killed.
Right. So you're jumping back and forth between the boat and working for a construction company, but at some point, you ended up with a crew of your own guys running your own construction company. How'd that happen?
So the way that happened, like I said, I really feel like the Roger Ashcraft gentleman, more than my random captains. I fished on a different boat with a different captain every year, but he was the one consistent man in my life that really just mentored me all the time. As soon as I committed to stop fishing again, or as soon as I committed to stop fishing in general, because every year he'd be like, "Do you got to go fishing again?" And the last year I went, I promised him it'd be my last year. And so when I came back to work for him, I only fished for 4 years. I kind of misspoke there. 5 fisheries, 4 years. Okay? So at this point, I'm 18, 19, 20, 21. Yes, that's correct. I was 21 years old, and I really wanted to have my own construction company. I went to work for him full time, and he immediately, as soon as he knew I wasn't going to leave him again, he immediately elevated me to the position of running his company, even to the point where I could hire people or even run people off if I needed to. And I immediately hired my best friend, Lightning, who's still with me today, but we'll probably come full circle back around to him. But so now I'm working for an awesome guy who mentored me and have my best friend there, and I was running his company, and he stopped coming to work altogether. It didn't take him long to stop coming to work, and so I worked for him until right around my 23rd birthday, and he showed up to work, and one day, and this is what drove me to do my own thing, he showed up to work, and he started yelling at me, which I was okay with because as far as I'm concerned, I was accountable for everyone there. And that's how he treated me. He was yelling at me for things that other guys did. But I never, my entire life, I have never let people tell me what means and methods to use to do things, because I understand nobody has any business telling me what means and methods to use to achieve the same end that they want me to achieve, right? And today I permeate that onto the guys that work for me. If you're not doing it the way that I do it, I don't say a word to you. As long as the end result is the one that I'm looking for, that's the only part I have any business in telling somebody how to do. So this is the one friction point him and I had, is I had figured out how to do things because he didn't come around for like a year, it seemed like. And I had started to develop my own means and methods for doing the job, right? And they were blatantly more efficient than the way that he taught me. And it was minor things. It wasn't like I changed his whole program, but he didn't like it. And so he got there and he started bitching at me, this and that. And I was like, hey, I was trying to explain to him why this makes us more efficient. And he said, if you want to tell me how to fucking run my business, then go start your own fucking business. And I was like, I will. And I said, and when I do, I'm going to put you under. And he laughed at me, which didn't go over well with me. So I put my plans into overdrive, and within a very short amount of time, in about 90 days, I had figured out how to get my hands on a trailer and all the equipment that I needed, and I started my own construction company. Of course, the first thing I did was take all the guys that had been with me, right? And so I ruthlessly went after his contracts because it was personal for me. And within less than a year, by the time I was 24, I had put him under. To the point, and he may watch this someday, but it's still the truth, to the point where he came to me and asked me to please not take his last contract. So at that point, I figured I had beaten him and I had won, and I didn't. I did not take his last contract. I just left it alone. So... and from there, by the time that I had gotten to the end of my second year, I had doubled in size. And by the time that I was close to 25, I had grown to 4 trailers. There's all big construction trailers. And I had 4 crews, and we were building buildings around the clock. To kind of put it into perspective, my third year in business and construction, we completed 314 different buildings, and those could be anywhere from residential. We did a lot of high-end, couple $1 million homes, to commercial buildings, 20plexes, hotels, stuff like that. We did a hotel in Whittier, but altogether we did 314 structures. My third year in business, I was massive at that point.
So you guys were running the construction company, right? You had a pretty good crew going on, but at some point that ended up crashing around 2008, right? What happened there? I mean, you would basically be considered bankrupt, maybe not legally, but...
Well, let me tell you how I got there first really quick. So my ambition kind of knows no bounds. I had no credit for, first of all, I've never had a line of credit. I've never borrowed money from anybody, but I wanted to build my own subdivision. That requires you to have credit. I had one stain on my credit, which was an unreturned video rental. Back when that was a thing, of course, it was Video City. And what I'd done is rented a video game, and I lost it somehow. Couldn't find it, and they ended up racking me up like $1,000 bill for it, and I was never able to pay it. And they turned it into collections, whatever. I didn't care because I never, cared about credit. I always saved my money and bought whatever I needed. And so I never thought about having credit until I decided I wanted to develop a subdivision. And what I did was I went and pitched my dream to, I knew I had to have something to take the bank, so I went and pitched my idea to a landowner, talked him into putting me in first place on 30 different acres of land, which would be 30 lots. And then I took that into the bank and presented it to him and said, hey, I got all this land. Loan me the money to build a subdivision. And this is basically in 2008. And so back then, if you know anything at all, you know that they would give money pretty much to anybody. So they funded my entire project, and we went gangbusters. And I threw up a whole subdivision and didn't have any of them sold. And the 2008 housing collapse, the crash, happened with me having multiple spec homes on the market that obviously weren't able to sell at that point. So the bank took action, of course, and they came back and repossessed everything. I ended up walking away from the deal $1.2 million in the hole with nothing to show for it. I had even built my own home and put my heart and soul into it, and basically built my dream home. And we had started to move in, and I never even got fully moved in when the crash happened, and I never did get to move in. I lost the house. I lost all the houses and went away from that $1.2 million in the hole.
Now, what about your business partner? Didn't you have a business partner back then?
I did have a business partner. He was a Russian guy, super awesome guy, the hardest working man I've ever met in my life, maybe other than Lightning, who currently works for me still. It'd be a toss-up between those two guys. I had immense amount of respect for him. His drive was unprecedented, but neither of us had any kind of business sense at all. The only reason we were successful is because of our ambitions and our drive. We certainly didn't know how to manage money. We didn't understand anything about all that. And so when we had a hiccup, what ended up happening is we had a corporation. He was the president, and I was the vice president, and the treasurer, whatever else. He ultimately had control of our payroll, so subsequently had control of our payroll taxes. And when we had a hiccup, you guys, you have to remember, I never bought anything on credit. So everything I owned outright, but he had amazing credit, and he would buy, had a home, four-wheelers, snow machines, 2 pickups. His wife drove a BMW. It was all on credit. So when we had that hiccup, it didn't affect me the same way it affected him. So what he ended up doing to keep from losing everything is he spent all of the employee tax. So you have to match the tax to the employee and give it to the IRS. So we had a separate account where all the employee taxes went into so we could pay quarterly, and he used that to keep from losing everything. Well, that's obviously illegal and a crime. So he basically... When the rubber hit the road and it started to become apparent that there was some misappropriation and stuff like that going on, he immediately pulled up stakes and left the country. Did it need to be that extreme? It doesn't matter. That's what he did. He moved to New Zealand, took his family to New Zealand, and that's the last I ever heard of him. So now I'm stuck holding this bag, and that's actually why I ended up with all of the debt from the bank. I did not get in trouble for what happened with the employee taxes because of the way our corporation was structured. And it was obviously provable that he had been doing all that and processing all that. And so obviously they looked into it, but they didn't pursue me for any of that, thank God. But they certainly did come after me for all the debt we were in from that developed subdivision that never got realized. So I was straddled with that debt when I walked out of that.
So did you end up having to pay that back?
It's not so much that I had to pay it back. Some of it I had to pay back. We had a revolving line of credit. That was a $100,000 revolving line of credit. That one I wasn't really able to get out from. The rest of it, they pursued me for 2 or 3 years and ultimately put it as a write-off. But doesn't mean I wasn't carrying that burden on my shoulders for 3 or 4 years, right? Ultimately, they wrote it all off. And if you look on my credit today, it's not on there. But my revolving line of credit, I had to contend with to a high degree. A lot of that got written off too, but certainly not all of it.
So ultimately, you didn't have to pay the debt back, but still, you're walking away from this $1.2, probably $1.3 million in debt. You don't have your construction company anymore. At the time, you were in the debt, even though you didn't end up having to pay it back. What do you do next? Where are you going from there?
Well, I want to rewind just a little bit. The banks tried to force me to file bankruptcy. That way they could write the debt off, right? And I kept refusing to file bankruptcy. And I was making payments on the debt is what was going on, right? And they kept trying to force me into bankruptcy, and I'd come back and say, no, I'm making my payments. You can't make me, because I refused to. I felt like I owed it to them, right? That's really what was going on, and I was against them putting me into bankruptcy because, ultimately that's not me shouldering my debt. So I kept refusing them for years, and they ended up getting around me legally, and basically they were able to write it all off, but I never had to file bankruptcy. All right, they tried to make me they're like, why won't you file bankruptcy? All these problems will go away. I'm like, I don't want them to go away, because I fully intended to be successful enough to recover from that, right? So was it a relief when they stopped pursuing me? Yes, but it wasn't the way that I didn't take the easy way out.
So what do you do when you walk away from that, though?
So obviously you have to do some gear shifting. My answer, because I was like everybody else in the United States for the most part, I had no concept of how to manage money or anything like that. And I had always solved all my money problems by working harder. I was very successful at that. I just worked harder. I remember when we got hit by our first workman's comp bill, my partner and I, it was $80,000 comp bill, and that devastated us. That basically ruined us right out the gate, right? We were only been in business for less than a year, and here we have, and he didn't set it up quarterly, he set it up annually, and we got hit with an $80,000 comp bill. We didn't have that kind of money. We certainly hadn't budgeted for it, and that's part of the problem of having a partner. I could get into that later, but the way that him and I solved that problem is we worked harder, quite literally. For about a 3-month span, we were working from 3 in the morning, and we would come back to work at 7, 8, and we would work till 2 or 3 in the morning. We're setting up lights all over the place and just kept working. All our employees would leave, and him and I would just hammer down all night long together. And we made it. We made enough money from working that fucking hard to pay off that $80,000 and keep them from shutting down our business, because ultimately what they'll do, if you can't pay them, they just pull your business license and this and that. And we recovered from it. So, that kind of stuff is not healthy for you, because you start to think that there's nothing you can't overcome, right? And so still at this point, I'm not bothering to worry about my finances and about, I knew about capital savings. It's how I got to where I was. But, as far as cash flow and stuff like that, I had no clue how to manage any of that. So, I did it by the seat of my pants and very roughshod, but I was successful at it because you haven't met a guy with, probably haven't met too many people with the ambition that I had. If I have to work, 20 hours a day and only sleep 4, I don't give a fuck. Do it, right? I had a goal, I have a vision, I'm going to go get it. So that's how we, so when I got into this massive debt, that was my plan. I'm just going to work harder. So coming out of that, What did I do from there? Well, the housing market had completely collapsed, which meant that you couldn't build anything for anybody. I had an older brother, my oldest brother. He was a very successful businessman, very good at managing money. Part of his success, of course. I had the wrong guy mentoring me probably that whole time, but he knew I was struggling, and he had he owned like 40 trucks and all kinds of equipment, and he was a civil, he did civil work along with hauling freight to the North Slope. So he had a dual business there, and he called me and said, "Hey, I know you're struggling. I'm bidding a bunch of jobs for the U.S. military. Would you like to come up here?" And there's a bunch of things that I'm not interested in bidding because I'm a civil company, but there's all kinds of construction stuff that's attached to these civil jobs. Would you like to come up here and just bid on them and see if you can win some of them? And the barrier for entry for that is I could have never done that without him, because he had, all the bonding and stuff. And he also had a business partner that was a disabled veteran. And so he's getting disabled veteran preference and all that. So I went up there and just spent 6 months hanging out with my brother, crunching numbers, figuring out all these bids for the U.S. military, and I got awarded a bunch of them. And so I called everybody, that used to work for me, or the cream of the crop anyhow, and I said, "Hey, I got some jobs. You want to come back to work for me?" And all of them did. Every single one of them came back to work for me, and they hadn't worked for me in almost a year, as we lost everything. And then it took me 6 months, about 6 months of fiddling around, and about 6 months of bidding all these jobs. I got them. And so we went to work, and that carried us for about 2 years. I was able to win, do all those contracts, bid on a bunch more, win a bunch more. And at that point, I just figured I would do that for the rest of my life, because my deal with my brother was phenomenal. He paid my payroll, and he was paying all my guys anywhere from $54 to $68 an hour. And he was paying me something similar, but I had a side deal with him where every job that I won, I would get, like 10 grand or something. And then they would pay me tool usage. So I'd make an extra $40,000, $50,000 on a job, and I had multiple, I was making more money working for him than I had ever made. And I ran the projects in the business, but ultimately I was working for him, and I was making more money doing that than I had ever made on my own. Right. So I just would have kept doing that for the rest of my life. But year number 3, I did all my bids like normal, put them all out, and I didn't get a single one. Not one. So ultimately, I had to wrap up the couple jobs I was on. Fortunately, we had about 3 months worth of work, and I let all those guys that I had brought back around me, let them all know that that I wasn't going to have any work for them. And then I had 3 months to try to figure out what I was going to do. And I started talking to my older brother, not the oldest one that I was working for, but there's one more in between us. And he owned 2 or 3 trucks that ran to the North Slope, and that's all he did. And he said, "Hey, man, why don't you just jump in one of these trucks and haul a few loads while you're figuring out what you're going to do?" So I did. I jumped in the truck, and I made 10 trips to Prudhoe Bay. In my training time, you do 10 trips with somebody else. You follow somebody else. And so I did 10 trips, and then I got paid for it. And I looked at my paycheck, and it was the most money I had ever made in my entire life for time spent. And I have done some big money stuff, fishing, this and that. And I didn't like the job. It was incredibly dangerous. I've done lots of dangerous jobs. Without exception, that was the most dangerous job that I had ever done. And it terrified me. I did not like doing that job. I loved the atmosphere. I loved the people on that road. I loved the culture of that road. But it is a very, very intense job, and a lot of people lose their lives doing it. But they pay you so well, it's hard not to do it. So I thought, well, man, if I can make this kind of money working for my brother, what kind of money could I make doing it myself? So I went out and bought a truck and started running the Alaska Haul Road in my own truck, and was very successful, and so successful that I was only working about half as hard as everybody else, because, I just, you only need so much money. But I did that for 2 years, and then I had the brilliant idea of, this is so good, I should buy another one. right? So I bought another truck, and I quickly bought another one. I really didn't even run 2 trucks before I was running 3. So I had 3 trucks running on the road, and obviously having somebody else pilot your truck for you is not nearly the same as piloting yourself. So for the first time, I started dealing with a new problem, which was all my shit was breaking down all the time and getting destroyed. And I realized very quickly that I needed to get a shop of my own. So I got my own shop, and as soon as I got my own shop, I realized that my overhead was consuming any of my profitability, and I was driving my ass off to be able to pay those 2 guys and not lose them, right? Because there wasn't enough money. So in other words, they were making me make less money now that I have 3 trucks. So I went to my oldest brother. I was smart enough to do that. He was a very successful, civil guy that owned 40 of his own trucks, and I was like, hey, I'm not making money anymore. He's like, yeah, man, you gotta run 1 truck by yourself, or you gotta have at least 10, or before it starts to even out and come back your way. And I was like, well, crap. So that became my new goal, is I was gonna own 10 trucks. Again, no credit. I had to buy them one at a time. I had to buy them outright. And so I did, and I had an aggressive plan, and over about a 4 to 6 month period, I made it to 11 trucks, aggressively focusing all my attention on expanding every dime, everything I had, and I expanded to 11 trucks. I figured if I had 11, if I had one broke down, I would still have 10 running, right? I had good contracts, and the whole world looked like everything was gonna work out for me. And this is, by this time we're in 2015, right? And I finally made it to a peak where I was making money, and I was probably only into my 4th month of having all these trucks running, and I was making good money, and I was starting to turn it around. And 2015 happened, and that was the 2015 oil collapse. 40 to 45% of the population of Fairbanks was unemployed overnight. Nobody had a job. I'm a blue-collar guy, so I didn't even know anybody with a job. Like, everybody I knew didn't have a job. The only people that had jobs were people that, sell you coffee and give you cigarettes and stuff, right? The people in the local service industry were fine.
Hold on. At one point, I seen a video the other day of you from back then, a production that was done by Ronan. In that video, you were driving that blue Peterbilt on the haul road, and you said that you were making $7,000 a week. Was that with just 1 truck you were making that money, or was that with several?
So to kind of put it into perspective, the average guy that worked for me, if I look back now, the average guy that worked for me would make anywhere between $10,000 and $15,000 a month, and that's driving my truck, right? So, if I'm driving the truck myself, that $10,000 or $15,000 a month I would be giving to my driver is coming directly to myself. So $7,000 a week, it's probably a low number, to be honest with you, right? I wasn't making anywhere near that because I had all those trucks. When I was driving my own truck by myself, you bet, $7,000 a week wasn't. That would be because I was being really fucking lazy, to be honest with you. I make a lot more than that in a week. You get paid $3,000 to $4,000 up to $5,000 to go up, and you could make $1,500, $2,000 to come back, and you could do it 3 times a week. You can make $20,000 in a week if you're really humping your ass. I just didn't like to hump my ass that hard, quite honestly, because every trip was like playing with my life, and I hated it. So I did the bare minimum, to get by. And plus, at this time, I have trucks. I'm really needed in the shop a lot, right? That was my biggest problem, was keeping good employees, good mechanics on staff. So here's a little side note. So at this point in my life, I had just had, I have in my recent memory this 2008 collapse, and I just started this trucking company, and it's pretty rocky, and I told myself, you know what, I'm going to make sure that some external event doesn't ruin me ever again, right? So this is a time in my life when I opened Far North Tactical, which was a gun store, but we specialized more in the tactical side. Of course, I sold guns and ammo and all that in magazines, but really I focused in on selling body armor and gas masks and night vision and thermal and just our slogan on the store was everything you need to take over a small country, right? So, and we tried to live up to it. I was pretty passionate about that. Sold a lot of less lethal stuff, just all kinds of crazy stuff. I certainly pushed the envelope a lot. And I also opened a bounty hunting business as well. I found a couple different bondsmen, and they started contracting me exclusively to do all of their repossessions, so to speak. I was hunting down all their skips, so I was running both of those companies. And I was still doing construction too. I was still doing like roofs, and I had an insurance company I was hooked up with, so I was still delving around in construction. And then I also, at this time in my life, I became very politically active. I hate to use the word political, but I was also doing a lot of, I had an AM talk show for 7 years there that was very successful. It ended up culminating into 2 talk shows. I was doing one on Saturdays and one on Mondays. And that led to me doing a lot of public speaking. I was speaking at a lot of universities, a lot of rallies. I'm neither Republican or Democrat, so that was pretty confusing for Republicans and Democrats. So I would get invited to speak at Democrat conventions, to get invited to speak at Republican conventions, and they always regretted when I would show up. But after I started to speak, they're like, "Whoa, this guy is not in line with us," So, but from the outside looking in, I am an AM talk show host, right? So, with guys that are so ingrained in their political agenda, they're not able to decipher where I'm at, which, for the record, it was more of a libertarian stance, right? And back then, libertarians weren't very mainstream back then. And I would tell people, my political leanings were classical liberal, right? And so that you can see some of the confusion with Democrats, where they would think I was a liberal, right? Which I was farthest from it you could possibly be. If anything, I was much closer to a conservative than I was to an actual liberal. A classical liberal would be like your minarchist, your night watchman status, so to speak. So that was my whole political delve there. But I had a lot of shit going on at that time, right? And because of that, this is during the heyday of reality TV, and Alaska was the hot spot for reality TV. So I'm sure you can imagine running these type of businesses multiple times in my life. I got approached by networks that were willing to hire crews to come film me for 3 or 4 months and try and build a story and release a sizzle and see if they could get a network to go ahead and pick it up, right? So that happened to me 4 times. 4 different times I had cameramen running around, chasing me around, trying to make sizzles out of me. Once for Ice Road Trucking, a spinoff of that. Once for the bounty hunting business. Once for, the whole store and this and that. And I also ran a tactical training facility that had about 85 to 90 people. They were very keen to try and spin that into a militia type thing, which it wasn't, but they certainly wanted it to be. But so I had a lot going on with that kind of stuff. Long story short, I was this close to being famous multiple times, right, from multiple different angles. So, Glenn Beck, his media team, The Blaze, they also came and made a documentary that didn't center entirely on me, but I was heavily involved in. And that was over a bunch of fandango that happened up there in Fairbanks with the FBI and the ATF and this and that. Back to the 2015 oil collapse. When that happened, I had to make a tough decision. I had all these other businesses going on, right? But
wait, hold on. I want to ask one thing. How are you? Obviously, we spent some time with our moms, but how are you juggling having kids at this time? All these businesses, the collapses, the tough shit. And I mean, as far as we were concerned, none of this was even going on. We didn't really see it. But how are you juggling us?
So I had 3 sons from 2 different moms. Fortunately for me, I did one thing right. I picked good mothers. Even though we weren't together, they did not make my life a living hell, and they allowed me to see, be a huge part of my son's life. And so I would take all of my kids for massive blocks of time whenever I could, which was quite often, right? And quite often you boys came and stayed with your dad, for 3-4 months at a time, a couple times a year even, right? At least once a year, no matter what. And as you guys got older, it increased, obviously, quite a bit. But I was taking you boys when you were like 2 and 3 year olds, right? I think the first time I took you without your mom, you were only 3 years old. So, yeah, that's an interesting thing is how was I juggling that? Well, I took you to work. That's how I juggled that.
Oh, yeah, I remember riding in the semis a lot, but
Yeah.
no, yeah.
I took you to work
a good
always.
point.
You guys were on my construction sites. Any picture where if you guys were staying with me, and somebody happened to take a picture of me in an excavator or a loader, I did a lot of dirt work jobs or whatever I had going on. There's one boy right there and one right there and one on my lap, and I just made it work, man. I made it work. I refused to let any obstacle get in the way of me being a dad. I was not going to let that happen. I wasn't going to be that deadbeat piece of shit that wasn't in his kid's life. So no matter what, I made it happen. There's days I missed work. There's days I missed work. It is what it is.
That's what always is funny to me. People think it's crazy that you did the ice road trucking. I think it's crazy
I had all
that
my
you
kids
had
in the
your
sleeper.
Fucking 7-year-old kids in the sleeper, and I went with you the most. I thought it was fucking amazing. I wasn't really old enough to realize how dangerous driving on that road was. So I'm just sitting there bobbing around. You taught me how to talk on the radio and let people know when we're, southbound on Addison's Pass, whatever it might be. And I thought it was cool as fuck running the haul road. I didn't realize how dangerous it was.
In many aspects, it is cool, right? And there's parts of me that miss it, but not enough to want to go back. It's incredibly dangerous. But, I knew that that for young boys, rather, that quantity can overcome quality, right? Just being with your dad as much as possible was more important than anything else, right? I didn't need to worry about all these fine-tuning of being dad of the fucking year. I just needed you guys to be with me, and as long as you were with me, I was going to be able to develop who you became, and that's all I cared about with my sons. I didn't care about if you guys thought I was going to win dad of the year. I cared about molding you in my image and being the influence on who you became. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't enjoy having to be a babysitter and run all these businesses. I mean, I'll just be straight up with you. There was many times when your mother, for example, offered to just not send you, and that was never an option for me, right? She would be like, hey, it's time for you to take your boys. I'm like, fuck, how am I going to pull that off? And like, well, I don't have to send them. I'm like, that's not happening. Send my sons, right? So, yes, I did manage to be a full-time dad or part-time dad, however the hell you want to say it. I was a dad to my sons, no matter what I had going on, and I didn't always have the most untumultuous relationships, and all of that. It's not like I just grab a new mom for you guys. So, yes, on the side, I was raising my 3 sons for sure. So let's get back to getting out of Alaska. I had to look around and decide what I was going to do. And the way I made that decision is I went into work, and I had been going into work every day. And every time I went into work, everybody that worked for me would be there when I'd get there, and I'd have these meetings and be like, you guys need to go find a job, right? I'm not going to be able to give you a job. We're an oil field service company, and the oil field is literally shut down. You guys got to go find jobs. And I would come back to work, the next day, and all the same guys are there. And then it just, it dawned on me that the reason they weren't going to find a job is because there wasn't one to be found. There's nowhere for them to go. And at least if they were coming to my shop, they could make, their families could feel like they were doing something. They didn't have to just sit at home and stare at their wife and be a loser, These guys are all like at the end of their fucking rope. So, because of that, even though I already had a contingency plan with all these other businesses, I swore this would never happen to me again. I could have just rocked back on my heels and focused in on that, because you guys have to remember, again, I don't go into debt. I didn't owe money on these trucks, right? So I could just rock back and lean into the businesses I had. But, man, I couldn't do that to these guys. So I made a decision, And I said, hey, I'm going to find us work. I found us a job down in Savannah, Georgia. Actually, I found us a job in South Carolina that was a Volvo plant. I just looking on the internet and found a job, and I got a hold of the contractor that was doing that job, and I said, hey, it says you need trucks, and and they wined and dined me. Yeah, bring all your trucks down. We have work for you. You'll probably make $1,100 to $1,400 a day with your trucks, and we'll supply all your fuel and just take it out of your settlements. And they just made it so easy for me. So the next day when I went into work, I told everybody, hey, I'm going to take this company down to South Carolina and do this Volvo plant. Who's coming with me? And every single guy said me, without including all the mechanics. Everybody wanted to go. And so we just shifted into high gear and dumped all of our resources and what little we had left into getting the hell out of there. I closed down all my other businesses, liquidated everything, grabbed and grabbed all my trucks and all my guys, and we motored all the way down from Alaska. We drove all the way to Ohio because we found out that the trailers that we needed to have were end dumps, and that's not a thing in Alaska. So I did own a bunch of belly dumps, but I didn't own any end dumps. And so we went to Ohio, picked up a bunch of end dumps, and then we drove them down to South Carolina to start this job. And it didn't take us long. It took us about 2 hours of being on the job, figure out that we had the wool pulled over our eyes pretty hard. First of all, there was no fuel for us. That was the biggest thing that crushed us. Is I didn't have any money left when we got there, and they lied about having fuel for us, right? So, and they also lied about having a place for us to park. What I did to figure out a place for us to park our trucks when we weren't working is I went and talked to the owner of a gas station, and I said, hey, if you let me park all my trucks permanently here at your gas station while this job's going on, I will exclusively buy fuel from your gas station. And so he was willing to make that deal. So that gave us a home for all of us. And my mechanic's living out of a minivan, quite literally, fixing all my trucks in the parking lot. And that guy allowed all that because I had made a deal with him. So that's how I got us over that hurdle. I borrowed some money from a couple different people for fuel. I borrowed about $10,000 just from friends that assumed I would pay them back, which I did. But that's how I got us rolling. And then that's when we figured out that we had actually made a horrible mistake. And the mistake that we made is I had never been in a place where that capped the weight that you could carry at such a low number. Well, the weight limit was 80,000 pounds. Well, I have Alaska trucks that are stretched out to 310-inch wheelbase. They have 46,000-pound rear ends. They have dual frame rails. They have heavy front ends. They got massive cat engines. All of them have these massive cat engines. They get horrible fuel mileage. They're built to pull mountains, and they're also geared to pull mountains. My top speed on my truck's 60 miles an hour. You take my trucks up to 75 miles an hour. They're getting two fucking miles to the gallon, right? So the big problem is the trucks we were running against there, they could carry 28 tons. Well, you're getting paid by the ton. My trucks were capped out somewhere between 19 and my best truck carried 22 tons. That's a far cry from 28. So these jobs are geared towards profitability being at 28, 26 to 28, some guys 20, 30 tons, right? So we didn't fit the business model down there. So we couldn't make any money. So on top of having to borrow money, I wasn't making any money, and it was a terrible thing. We were hitting somewhere around $700 a day. If you know anything about trucking, that's going negative. My drivers weren't making any money. They were not happy. I started to lose drivers, and so by a stroke of luck, I was on a job, and there were some other truckers there. The advantage we had is all our trucks said Alaska. We had the big Alaska symbol on the side, and this is when Ice Road Truckers was a really big deal. So everybody wanted to talk to us everywhere we went. We were celebrities. We were just very broke celebrities, right? So a guy came over and talked to me after the day's work was done. He'd been waiting to talk to us. He was working on the same job. He's like, hey, man, my boss is out of Georgia, and we're just wrapping up this job, you know, and he's like, my boss is out of Georgia. I've been telling him about you guys, and he wants to meet you. He's got a little job that you guys can do if you want to come down there. So I did. We took all of my trucks down to Georgia, Savannah, Georgia, and the name of the company was Trademark Truck Lines. The owner's name is James, and when we got there, we went and did a job for him, but I hit it off with that man right away. I'm just like a kindred spirit, and in fact, he reminded me so much of my previous boss in construction that mentored me. Like, I just immediately loved that man.
We had to go shut some people up on the other side of the wall. We are literally filming this in Hack Nation's shop. It's kind of the theme of this podcast. So you're in Georgia. You hit it off with the owner of Trademark, James.
Yeah, and he's like 30, or he's like 10 years younger than me, right? So there was something to be said there. I had done a lot of things he had never done before, but he was much more successful at that point in his life than I was. So I had an immense amount of respect for him as well. So, and you know, he wasn't a massive company, but he's much better off than me. He had double the trucks I had. And that man just went completely out of his way to find extra work to keep my guys busy all the time. And, you know, if anybody's watching this is thinking, well, you know, it probably benefited him. He was making money off of you. He refused to take any money from me for almost the entire time I was there. I insisted the last couple months we were there that he take a percentage from what he was paying me. But he refused to do it for the longest time. I owe that man everything. He got me doing some different dirt work jobs and doing some lime hauls and stuff where it didn't matter that my trucks were heavy. You know, it was jobs where I could load my trucks up, and then they started to come into their own because I have these big-ass, powerful trucks, and he helped me find work that I could actually make money doing. I still wasn't anything glamorous, right? But it allowed me to go ahead and get in this position where I could start actually getting some money set aside. And of course, all I wanted to do was get the fuck out of Georgia or out of the South in general, because I realized that it was going to destroy me. And I wanted to get back to an oil field because I'm an oil man and I understand the oil field. So our exit plan was to get to North Dakota. And I had no connections there. I just knew if I got there that it would be better than where I was, because we were on a deathbed, slowly dying. So I came up with a plan and got together with my main mechanic, Lightning, who's still with me to this day. And we decided, and our stuff was falling apart, right? Because it wasn't in the greatest shape when we came down there. And we had many months of working our asses off with our trucks, not making any money. We'd been patching everything back together.
Well, they probably got their fucking dicks beat off on the haul road, huh?
Yes, they did. They were kind of junky when we got there. So we knew that they were in no shape to make it all the way to North Dakota, let alone get there and go to work. So Chris and I, Lightning and I, we went and we just went on we put a plan together, and what we did was we went to the junkyards and we bought every good drum we could find, and we went and put all new drums on all junkyard drums on all of my stuff, redid all of the brakes on all of my trucks. A bunch of my trucks needed kingpins, so we did a bunch of kingpins on my trucks. And then we went to the junkyard and they gave us tires, and we accumulated like a couple, 100 and something tires. Took them all down to the recap shop and had them, go through them and recap anyone that they could. So I was able to outfit all of my trucks with recap tires. And once I got to that point, I had saved up $10,000 on top of doing, refurbishing my trucks with junk. We also rebuilt quite a few of my differentials and transmissions by going and finding similar transmissions and differentials and pulling them apart and rebuilding ours with those used parts. So we were doing whatever it took to keep my trucks up and running. And then when I decided that we were in sufficient shape, I started looking really hard, trying to find us work in North Dakota. I couldn't find anything, but I had a friend in North Dakota who told me that, and he was part of he was from Alaska, and he had went to North Dakota with a couple of his trucks, and he was doing pretty good. And he didn't know where to tell me to try to get a job, but he's like, Aaron, just come here. You'll figure it out when you get here. So, because he knew me really well, right? he knew that I would figure it out. So we did. We pulled up stakes, took off, went to North Dakota, and I didn't even know where to go to in North Dakota. And how we figured out where we were going to go is while we're riding in the trucks, I told my wife, or my old lady at the, who's still my old lady today, I better say that. While we're heading, we decided to pull up stakes and we're going to head to North Dakota. And the way that we figured out where we were going to go, because I didn't know where to go, was I told my wife, here's the general area where we're going to go, and find us the cheapest place you can possibly find us. Because I didn't want to use up, I needed this money for diesel fuel once I found us a job. And so she found a place in Ross, North Dakota. It was a one-room little cabin, and what it is for oil field workers, that are just in from out of town, and it's $250 a month. So
to put it into perspective, how fucking small this place was, my brother and I, because we were with him at this time, actually, we lived with you. Matt and I would literally fight over who got to sleep on the floor versus sleeping in the trunk of the car. One of us slept in the back of the car.
Yeah, there wasn't enough room in this one-room little cabin for the whole family, but that's how we ended up where we're at. And you boys would sleep in my truck if I was lucky enough to be home, but it didn't happen often. But anyway, we get there to North Dakota. We make that our little home base, and they had a pretty big parking lot. I was able to park all my trucks there. And, of course, all of my drivers are just sleeping in their trucks. Hardcore dudes. Love them to death. Give them a shout out. They had stuck with me a long time, but the next day, I basically went for a walk and just walked around that neighborhood. And by the time I made it to the end of that neighborhood, I'd found us a job for 3 of my trucks, and so I went to work with 3 of my trucks. And after working for 2 or 3 days, they realized that we were psychotically ambitious, and they hired all of my trucks. And it didn't take, that was it. We hit the ground running. Within about 60 days, I had put aside enough money to get a place. All I cared about was getting a shop, but I found a shop that had a little house on top of it, and that's the shop that we rented. We moved into that place. It was like a huge celebration for my family because now we had a home. We hadn't had a home in a long time. We didn't have a home in Georgia to speak of. We didn't have a home, when we got to North Dakota. And so it had been a long time since we had a place to call our own. So that was like a huge celebration. And now I have a shop as well. It wasn't, I got it as soon as I could. From a business point, I probably wasn't stable enough to get a shop, but we got a shop, and then we just started leaning into it really hard. And in North Dakota, that was my world. I knew how to thrive there, and I started growing hand over fist. So I grew my business to about 16, 17 of my own trucks and started bringing on leasers. We were about 23, 24 trucks. At one point, I had about 36 people on the payroll, mainly drivers. A lot of my trucks I was slip seating because I didn't want to buy more trucks, so I was just using them, using one truck to do 2 jobs. The guys would just switch seats, running them 24 hours a day. And I had to hire more mechanics, so I ended up with about 4 guys. Of course, Lightning's still there running my shop, but I have like 4 mechanics now. And as things stabilized for us, I started to realize that my mechanics had a lot of idle time, a shit ton of idle time. I needed that many mechanics because I got myself to the point in less than a year where I was bidding myself on contracts and winning my own contracts with oil fields, with oil companies. And when you're like that, you cannot let them down, right? Kind of put it into perspective. If I'm managing a well for an oil company, removing all of the production water or whatever I'm doing there, if I fail to do my job, that well will shut down automatically. And if it shuts down, it immediately freezes up. And it freezes up from paraffin, and it could cost the oil company $100,000, $200,000 to get the well going again. They'll bring in a rig over in, and they get it going again. So it's a really big deal. If you fail to do your job, not only will they fire you, you'll have this tarnish on your name, and other oil companies won't hire you. So no matter what, I had to make sure that I had the equipment to run on these jobs. And that's the game, is you have to bid enough jobs to provide everyone that works for you with work or they'll quit. But also, if you have any hiccup, you still have to be able to cover it. That's why it's always good to have leasers working for you and stuff like that. So I started to realize that even though I had to have all these mechanics, that they had a lot of idle time because we were good at our job and we would get ahead of everything. And then when I didn't need them, I didn't need them. So I had a 3-bay shop, and I decided to go ahead and open up one of my bays because we got asked all the time to work on other people's stuff. And I finally gave in and said, we'll just open up one bay. We could fit 2 to 3 trucks in that bay. So that's how we got started doing engines for other people. Okay. And so now I'm building engines for, for the general public. But, it started out as, hey, I got a leaser working for me. He's like, hey, can you guys fix my truck? And I used to refuse to even do that. So I started fixing my leaser's trucks, and then it became, can you fix my brother's truck? And can you fix my uncle's truck? And then, hey, I got a friend. Can you fix my friend's truck? And then it just took on a life of its own where we were fixing trucks for anybody that would come through the door. And at this point, I'm on top of the world. I've finally gotten to the point where financial problems are completely behind me. I have this massive crew of guys around me. I'm bidding any job I want, and competing with all these big dogs and this and that. I'm averaging about $200,000 a week in cash flow through my business, and so I'm able to push my weight around and kind of do anything I want. And I have 10,000-gallon fuel tank full of fuel and all these trucks and the whole world figured out and all these awesome contracts. And then COVID happened. Well, oil went negative during COVID, and the entire oil field shut down completely. Did not stress me out one bit. I had been through 2 giant collapses in my life and have struggled my entire life. So I learned from my lessons, and I had no debt. I owned all of my equipment. I owned all 25 trailers. I owned all of my trucks. I had 0 debt. And when I saw COVID, or when I saw oil drop to negative, I hadn't even lost any work yet, and I called the oil company and said, this is the last week I'm going to work for you. And, usually it's the oil company calling you and saying it's the last week you're going to work for me, but I wasn't even going to play that game. I wasn't going to fight everybody to see if I could hang on to my jobs and this and that. I had a meeting and told all the guys that drove for me, you need to find new jobs, and I helped almost every one of them find a job somewhere else. And then I parked all my trucks and went out and talked to my mechanics, and I was like, I'm not getting rid of any of you guys, but y'all need to look for different jobs because we had like 5 trucks in the parking lot waiting to come in to get engines done. So that was the only thing I had going on, right? And some safeguards that I did is I went and I paid my rent out, the lease on the place that I was in. I paid it out an entire year. I looked at my power bill and calculated how much I did a month. I paid it out a year. I just sent them a check and just anything you could think of like that. My wife had bought a car on credit because she had good credit. And so I paid that out like 2 years. And my wife went and purchased on credit a camper, and we moved into a camper and into a different shop. That's the shop I paid out for an entire year because I wanted to bring my overhead way down. And I moved, those couple of jobs over to this new shop, and my wife and I moved into a camper just to be smart. We certainly could have afforded a house, but we agreed together that we were just gonna be really safe and not dump all our money into stupid shit, because we had a sizable amount of money laid aside. Not like millions or anything, but we were okay. So I set us up for a year of being static. In other words, we're not productive at all, because I wanted to go for an entire year without having to do anything at all if I needed to. And the thing that happened was that is unique to North Dakota is all of the truck drivers that come there and work, they're not from there. The population of North Dakota is like 3 people. And so when COVID happened and oil went to negative, all those truck drivers left and went all over the United States because over the road became the most profitable thing to do. Anyone watching this will know that it was a heyday to be over the road with trucks. So what happened is we had done like 100 or so engines in the back end. We had engines running around everywhere with our name on them. So when all these guys went over the road, the truck stops, you started getting all this chatter around the truck stops of, oh, there's this guy in North Dakota that will build your engine. He does a super good job, and he's super reasonable, and he's like incredibly honest. Like, you know, if you want to go to a shop where you're not going to get fucked, he's the guy to go to. And I didn't know this was going on, of course. I'm just sitting here motoring along. So I had a meeting with the mechanics that worked for me, and I said, hey, you know, we have these 4 or 5 engines here. We're going to finish these out. I'm not even going to help you guys. You know, I always mechanic. I'm like, I'm not even going to help. That way I'm not running us out of work even faster. You know, I'm just going to mess around and do whatever. And you guys finish out these engines, but you really need to be looking for somewhere to go to work, right? Let me know if you need some help. I'll give you some contacts and this and that. 2 days later, I get a phone call from a guy. Hey, I'm from Missouri. Blah, blah, blah. I want to bring you an engine. I was like, really? Okay, come on. So I gave him a quote over the phone, and not only did he come, he brought 3 engines. He brought the engine in the truck and 2 more on the back of the truck, because he just loved my price and this and that. So, okay, well, never mind about looking for a job. Let's get these ones done, you know. And I started helping them, and so we're all working there. And then all of a sudden it was bam, 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 bam. My phone was just blowing up all the time. I'm from Florida, man. I heard about you. I'm from Florida. I heard you're in the middle of nowhere, but I want to bring you my truck. And I get another phone call. I'm from Canada. I'm right up above you. I'm in Saskatchewan or whatever. And I heard about you and this and that. And I run down in the States all the time. I want to bring you one of my trucks. And it just immediately, it wasn't like this really long process. It was like overnight, all of a sudden, our parking lot was fucking full of trucks. And I'm talking like around the block full of trucks. So to kind of put it into perspective, I used to like to tell this story. You know, I got, in a 1 month span, that first span of over the road, like really booming post-COVID, I had gotten 3 guys that brought me engines from Missouri, and not a single guy knew the other guy. So I'd gotten 3 engines from the same state, but none of them knew each other. That was the power of truck stops, where guys were just, you know, running all over the United States, going to truck stops, and I was being talked about. I was being talked about in all these different truck stops, and it made this engine building thing get a life of its own. So, you know, fast forward a little bit here, like 2 years, I have grown substantially, and we have leaned into this engine building thing quite a bit, and it was all word of mouth for the first 2 years, 100% word of mouth. And at any given time, we were 4 or 5 months out with, you know, 40 to 50 trucks in the parking lot, 100% word of mouth. And I realized that I started to realize the reason these people were traveling to me from all over the United States and Canada wasn't because I was the best mechanic in the United States. And not to say that I wasn't a good mechanic, but it was because they had this image of me that if they could just get their truck to me, then they could stop worrying about it, because no matter what, I wasn't going to fuck them. That's what was going on, is everybody was telling everybody else, if you don't want to get fucked, go see the guy in North Dakota. So when I decided to start doing social media, I was already known nationwide. You know, you couldn't put a face to me, but the myth of me permeated in all the truck stops. It was super obvious, right? I didn't have to go to truck stops to find out. I could look at my fucking parking lot and find that out. And I walk around the parking lot, and almost every state in the union is represented in my parking lot. You know, and I'm literally in one of the worst places in the United States to get to. You can't get freight going in. You can't get freight going out. It's an oil field place only. The oil field's fucking deader than a doornail, right? And it stayed dead all through COVID into the other side of it. So I knew what this phenomenon was, is that if you went to any other shop, you were running this huge risk of getting fucked over and getting your life ruined. So when I decided to get on social media, I leaned into that, of course, because that's who I was. You know, it's not this facade or this thing that I've made up. It's just the way that I've always done business. I wear my heart on my sleeve, and A lot of it, I think, has to do with the fact that I was a professional fighter for many, many, many years. And I've always had my own school, speaking about side gigs, I've always had my own school where, could have anywhere from 5 to 27 students, teaching fighting and stuff like that. So my confidence level when I'm talking to another man, I don't have any cowardice in me. I'll fucking knock you out and bounce your face off the concrete if it comes down to it, right? So I attribute a lot of my just forwardness and honesty to that. Is I don't really care what you think about me. I'm going to be honest with you all the time. And if the consequences are you get butthurt and you want to, do something about it, right? So I really attribute a hell of a lot of my success in the engine industry to my fighting background. And if you're having a hard time correlating, it's because I'm just brutally honest all the time because I don't give a fuck if you get butthurt. I'll fucking knock you out, right? So that brutal honesty and that forthrightness and just always doing whatever it took to stay above reproach just kept accelerating my popularity, and I permeated that on social media. I wasn't scared to challenge people that would talk shit about me. In fact, there was a whole group of guys that would actively try and shit on me all the time, and they would tag all their stuff with "don't ever be a hack" and "don't be like the hack" and stuff like that. There's all these hashtags running around. I love that kind of shit because I know that when the rubber hits the road, I'm above reproach. And it doesn't mean that no one's ever been upset with me. What it means is that I look at it for what it is, and I do the right thing no matter what, right? The right thing doesn't mean that I let you fucking walk all over me. So not everyone in the world loves me, but nobody can go out there and tell the world, well, that guy fucked me. That guy fucked me. There's nobody in the United States that can, with good conscience, go tell another man, that guy's shady, that guy fucked me, that guy anything. You cannot do it. You will not find that man. He does not live. And if there is a man out there saying shit like that, he's never met me. He's never done business with me. And he doesn't know someone that has done business with me. He makes shit up, right? And that's all I give a fuck about. That's all I care about is that image, which is who I am. It's not some image that I'm portraying. It's who I am, and it has made 100% of my success. I am living proof that just honesty alone can propel you to success. Obviously, it came with work ethic, ambition, and these things. But my name, you can go in my parking lot, walk around right now, and every state in the union's represented in that parking lot. There was a point in North Dakota when I was giving guys invoices and they were 11 months old. That means that they had brought me their truck, and 11 months later, I was finally able to give it back to them. That wasn't because we were lazy. That's not because we weren't motivated. It's because people would wait 11 months just to have somebody honest do their truck.
So you got this whole image built up at this point when the collapse happens of being an honest shop mechanic. You weren't really a shop at that time, and then you make a shop, and guys are coming from all over the U.S. to come and get their engines built because they heard that you're an actual honest, trusted shop. What happens when you take that image and put it on social media and start getting it out there even further?
So I used to say, back when we were first starting social media, and it didn't take me very long to become, for all intents and purposes, an influencer. I had a huge following very quickly, and it did increase our amount of business. There's no doubt about that. But I used to make a joke about it and say social media took us from being 4 months behind to putting us 8 months behind. And that's literally what happened. If I had never got on social media, would the doors be open for me that are open for me right now? Certainly not. Certainly not. But would I still be the busiest shop in the United States? Probably, right? Because that word of mouth proved, I had this whole couple years span where I didn't do social media at all, and I was already becoming the most successful shop ever, right? As far as just the image and what people thought about me and the willingness of people to travel across the world But once I started to do social media, I realized that that's the day and age we live in. I'm not going to go out and pull a fucking Yellow Pages ad. I'm not going to run a classified and stuff like that. I'm not going to get a billboard. Stuff like that's not effective. It's so yesteryear crap. In fact, nobody ever sees your billboard because they're too busy scrolling their phone while they're driving down the road, trying not to get in a wreck because they can't put their phone down, right? No, ain't nobody looking at those old methods. That's the age we live in. So social media, what social media did for me is it took my business that had already permeated it through all of the truck stops in the United States and just solidified it is what it did. And from there, social media has taken me to the point where I'm in Texas now, right? And the way I ended up in Texas is we had been doing this engine building thing in North Dakota. It had taken off a life of its own. We had become super successful, just as far as image and people's willingness to come to us. And my old lady and I had grown. During COVID, we tilled up an entire acre. I had 10 acres there, and we dedicated a whole acre to it and grew a garden. And that's because I'm a little bit of a skeptic, and I wanted to make sure I had my own food. For the most part, we didn't even eat any of it, It was just to have in case we needed. But we grew a huge crop of potatoes our second year doing it, and this is right before we moved. And what happened was I was up there, my old lady and I went up there and we dug up all the potatoes, and I was up there the next day putting them in gunny sacks and hauling them down to the shop and putting them into a cellar type room I had in there. And I had the last bag on my shoulders, and it was getting about to dusk, and it was cold because winter was just about to hit. And winters in North Dakota are the most brutal fucking thing you'll ever go through in your life. And that's coming from a guy that spent 19 years in Alaska. So I'm starting to feel a little depressed because I know winter's coming. We're way behind in the shop, and when winter comes for us, it puts us way farther behind. I'm already way behind. And as I'm walking down, going past all these trucks, it's not a new thing, but I'm just noticing that these trucks are from all over the United States, right? It's like Illinois, Ohio, Texas, whatever. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks. I'm like, why are you here? You're not doing the oil field anymore. You parked your trucks years ago. You're not using any of them. Why the fuck are you here? Why are you preparing for winter coming? A couple days before, I was heat taping everything and getting, and putting up skirting and getting ready for this brutal winter I know is coming. And I just asked myself, what the fuck are you doing? You can go anywhere you want. Social media did that. My word of mouth made me who I am. My honesty made me, made my business what it is. Social media made it so I could do whatever I wanted. Right, so I went into the house and hey woman, so we're gonna move, and and she's a good woman. She's been following me around for 14 years, 15 years now. Just any harebrained idea we had, she was there when we took off and went to Georgia and went to and went to South Carolina, went to Georgia, went to North Dakota, and she just believes in me. So. And she had established herself there in North Dakota. I got to give her credit here. She had a dream job. She had gotten all the way to the very top of that dream job, and I walked in the house and I said, hey, we're going to move. And I got zero resistance. She didn't mention her job. She didn't mention anything. And she just said, where are we going? And I said, I don't know. I hadn't even thought about that part yet. I don't know. So I went in my office and sat down and the first thing I put into Google was states without income tax. And that limited me really hard right out the gate. You have South Dakota, I think Oregon, Alaska, Florida, Texas. Well, I certainly wasn't going to go to South Dakota. That's just a even worse version of North Dakota. And I wasn't going to go to Florida. That's just not who I am. No way in hell I'd go to Florida. So I just decided immediately, within seconds, we're going to Texas. So I went back out and said, hey, we're going to go to Texas. And then she's like, oh, where in Texas? Well, shit, I haven't figured that out yet. So I went back in my office there and pulled up Google Maps, and I saw that that San Antonio had the most interstates going through it. And it was also close to Corpus Christi, so there's a port down there, and it's close to Midland, Odessa. And if you look at all that, San Antonio has some of the most truck traffic of anywhere in the world. And I was like, we're going to San Antonio. So once I decided San Antonio, the next morning my wife went on the prowl trying to find us a shop. I told her first thing, find us a shop. She found us a shop that we're sitting in right now. We called the owner of this shop, made an agreement with him, and we paid him a year out for this place. And then once we had a shop, then she found us a home that was close to it. That's why we wanted to find the shop first. We paid that home a year out. You guys see the pattern of how I make sure that I'm set myself up for success, right? Pay my stuff a year out. Then I had a meeting with all of my employees who had already followed me from Alaska to South Carolina to Georgia to North Dakota, and they had all built lives in North Dakota. You know, so I didn't know what kind of reception I was going to get, but I had a meeting with all of them, and I said, hey, we're going to go to Texas. And I said, we're going to do it quick. I want to be in Texas within 90 days. And every single guy said, okay, where? Where are we going? So, but I already knew where we were going to go, so I said, I'm going to send everybody a pin drop, find a home within, striking distance of this shop. And of course, I told everybody I'd give them we gave them money to move and to get reestablished and all that. Of course, we didn't just move, so we took care of everybody. And fortunately, I still had trucks and trailers and all that. I still had 2 flatbeds and a dry van, and we just loaded everything on those trucks, drove them down here, and I sold those trucks the first week we were here. That was my commitment to my family, basically, that I would never make a move again if they'd come here with me. So we got here, sold all the rest of my trucks. We dug our heels in, and I told all of my employees that I would pay them for the first 2 months to do nothing, right? Because I figured it would take us some time to get up and running. We didn't even make it 2 days, and I had more trucks in this shop than I had employees. So we never did get to just sit around. We have been hitting the ground running. That was 2024. And in 2024, we did 220 engines with 5 mechanics.
There was a quote that you had. You said before you moved your shop to Texas. So you're in North Dakota. You have this ultra successful shop. You're cranking engines out left and right, kicking ass. And you just up and decide to move it basically because of cold weather. But most people wouldn't do that. And you had a quote that you said, anywhere I go, I'm going to be there, so I have nothing to worry about. What does that mean, and where'd you find that mentality at?
So, obviously, I'm, have a social media following, and when I told everybody that we were going to move to Texas, I immediately had all kinds of detractors that tried saying, oh, they're moving because of all the lawsuits and everybody's out to get them because they fuck everybody's shit up, which is absolutely ridiculous. None of that obviously happened. Otherwise, everyone would know about it, right? It's just guys making shit up. But, some guys were like, well, people just can't wrap their mind around how do you have an uber successful business that is known nationwide, and you just shit on it and go take a big chance and try and reestablish it literally thousands of miles away, right? People can't wrap their mind around that, but they also can't wrap their mind around me, right? That's the same motherfucker that decided I was going to get on an airplane 2 days after my 18th birthday and fly into Alaska and just take a chance. It's the same guy that was like, fuck it, I'm going to South Carolina and just take a chance, and I rolled into the North Dakota oil field, didn't know a single person, didn't have a job lined up, found that where I was going to put my family the day before we got there, right? So they just don't know who the fuck they're dealing with, right? And so my reply to that, I thought about it for a minute. I said, I need to address all these people that are asking me these questions and making these accusations. So I made a video and I said, hey, everybody's asking me these questions, but the answer to your question is I don't give a fuck where I go, because no matter where I go, I'm going to be there, right? So in other words, my success isn't this building. My success isn't all this. My success is none of that shit. I lose it all. Earlier in this interview, I told you the multiple times that I lost everything. And I never cared about losing everything, because a man only fails ever when he quits. And so I got on and I told everyone, I said, I'm not worried about moving to Texas, because when I get there, I'm going to be there. I never fail because I never quit. And people can't wrap their mind around that because they've never taken a fucking risk in the first place. The only reason I am where I am right this minute and I have all these things happening for me is because I am willing to take a risk.
Yeah,
because
most people are scared to even move down the street into a bigger shop.
right.
Most shop owners at this point.
Yes, because changing location could ruin them. But changing location would never ruin me because no matter where I go, I'm going to be there.
Obviously, this was the last move. You upped the shop, moved it to Texas. All of your guys followed you for like the 5th time. And that's so you've got guys who've worked for you for 25 years, which isn't that impressive. Lots of people have that. But what's impressive is that it hasn't just been one business. You've failed, went to the next, he's followed.
I never
and you've
thought
had
about that.
lots of guys like that, right?
Yep.
So how do you get guys to trust you like that and want to stick not with your business, with you?
Yeah, I mean, if Lightning, for example, has been my longest standing employee. He's been with me 25 years. That was like, that was the only time I ever had to convince him to follow me is I was like, hey man, I'm shifting gears. I want you to mechanic for me. And he's like, I don't know how to mechanic. It's like, I can't do that, Aaron. I want to, I want to stick by you no matter what you do. But, he was scared. He was scared to switch from, being a master carpenter to now I'm going to become a mechanic. I'm starting over, and I just pointed out to him, I said, Chris, you weren't a mechanic or you weren't a carpenter when I met you. He became a carpenter because he met me, right? And that's all I had to tell him. And he's like, yeah, you're right. Let's do it. And why would guys follow me, to a different place? That one, I've never thought about what you just asked me, but yes, so that's actually more impressive. These guys followed me through transitions of different businesses and just stuck by me no matter what. And and it's every time it's a new business, it's a startup. Wow, that's pretty humbling. I never thought about that, but why? Because the image that I portray to the public of being this honest guy and always doing the right thing and being just and wanting, my fellow man, making sure that I don't take advantage of my fellow man to get where I'm going. That's hard to find in the world. So I don't blame them for following me. You want me to be super honest. I would follow me too. You can't find that. You want to get technical. It's less starting out by following me to the next business than it is go starting again at a different business. It's really less of a start out than it is just to say, hey, this guy's always had my back. He's always taken care of me. He's never let me starve. I have watched him for 6 months eat fucking kidney beans out of a can raw. So he made sure that he made payroll every fucking week like he promised us he would, right? I watched that man live in his truck while almost all of his employees had found houses at that point. He's still sleeping in his truck, and his kids are sleeping in his truck with him, and he's eating fucking kidney beans out of a can because no matter what, he's going to make payroll. It's really not asking that much of him to follow me. If you want to, you want to get to the nitty gritty, it's more of an unknown for them to go work for some other person, right? So, I mean, I do appreciate the sentiment of, changing jobs and this and that, but I just don't want to toot my horn too much here. If you're like that with people, it's not surprising they follow you around.
You got Hack Nation, and now you're rolling out a product line. You're doing probably around 300 engines a year, right?
We did 220 last year, and we have grown in size, both in facility and in employees. So if we didn't hit 300 engines this year, I'd probably be pretty surprised. What month are we in right now?
March.
So we're in March, and we started tracking jobs by POs in the beginning of December, and we're on 134. You do the math. We're going to hit 300, no problem.
So what about well, actually, no. How do you maintain quality cranking out that many engines?
So the way that I do that is I permeate excellence across my shop. The way that I do that starts by not hiring experienced mechanics. Our hiring process kind of goes like this. I sit down, I interview you, and the first thing I let you know is I could care less about what you do know. It doesn't have any factor in my decision making at all about hiring you. The only thing I care about is your work ethic, because I can teach you how to do anything, and I would rather teach you how to do things than have you bring your shitty habits here. The only thing I cannot teach a man is how to work. If he knows how to do that, if he has good work ethic, then there's no limit. There's no limit to where you can go working for me. So if I'm starting at a baseline of a blank slate, there's not a single guy that works for me that was a mechanic before he started. Not one. Okay? So I have a blank slate with good work ethic. It does not take long at all if you are not an asshole and an arrogant piece of shit to mentor men that respect you and get them to a point where they can build engines like this unsupervised. And I foster a lot of there's just a lot of things I foster in shop that promotes camaraderie. I insist on camaraderie. In fact, I don't do if you're one of those guys that comes up to me and says hammer me, and well, I don't care how important you are to me, you just lost your job. Nobody else decides how I'm going to run my business. Nobody else decides who I'm going to hire, who I value. Value's subjective. I don't really care what you think I should value. I know how to value people the right way, and a lot of it comes down to giving a fuck about people, right? So I make sure that everybody that works for me knows that I care about them on a personal level, not just care about how kind of job they do for me. You have to care about people in general. How is your family life going? You need any help or whatever it might be. And if you're able to open up your heart to people like that, they respect you and they want to do a good job for you, right? So I've just always been good about making sure that human beings weren't some tool like that's in my toolbox. These are living, breathing people with emotions just like me, with aspirations just like me. And I have helped a lot of people over the years leave me, right? I've helped a lot of people become successful enough to leave me and do their own thing. And I help every fucking one of them. I have never held another man back from leaving me because he has become successful enough to make that happen for himself. Now, I try to permeate an atmosphere where they never leave me, right? And I prefer that. But not everybody is built to work for you for the rest of their life. And I have no business trying to stifle or shut that down. Rather, it's better to help them, right? It pays off better dividends in the end. I'm not altruistic by any means. I'm doing everything for myself. But I learned a long time ago that the best way to enhance your own life is to understand that everybody is doing everything to benefit themselves, and the best way to benefit yourself is to benefit somebody else because it reciprocates, right? So I'm always looking for angles to make everybody's life better. And we also have high level of accountability here. And the other reason I've been super successful, one of the main reasons I think I've been super successful, is it's also something I noticed when I went to Highway and Heavy Parts and hung out with Andy, the owner over there at Highway and Heavy Parts. When I first met him, he was in their injector shop, and we have this whole vision that where we're going to do these new injector bodies and all that. But when I had to wait like 30 minutes to talk to him because he's in there testing injectors and, he's in there getting his hands dirty. That man never has to work again. If he didn't want to, he'd never have to work again, right? But that's not him, right? He's in there busting his ass. The respect and the loyalty that brings from the people around him, whether he's intending that or not, knows no bounds. And I have never had a single employee that works for me, including the current ones, that don't know for a fucking fact that there's nothing that they're doing that I will not do. I do all of it. And if you have a boss that will crawl under the truck and grease the truck to make sure it's getting done right, to make sure that you're doing it right, and he's getting grease all over himself and doesn't give two fucks because it's just part of life, you're going to stay with that guy, especially if he's not treating you like shit, right? You're going to have so much more respect for that guy. And that's who I am, There's no job, grease, dirt, anything that I'm not willing to get knee deep in or elbow deep in along with these guys. In fact, I'm on the bathroom cleaning schedule with everybody else. I go in and clean the bathroom when it's my fucking turn. That's what I do. I would never not clean the bathroom. I'll give you a great example. When we went to Michigan just a couple days ago, my wife was getting me a first class ticket. And I would have loved to ride first class, but I had two employees going with me, right? Well, they're going to ride and coach. So I said, no, that's not happening. You give me a seat and coach with them. We're all going to ride coach. Otherwise, everybody has to ride first class. Pick one. Well, she didn't want to pay that much money, so she put my ass back there in coach, and we all rode right beside each other all the way there, you know. I'm not too good for them. I'm not too good for anybody. If they're riding coach, I'm riding coach, right? It's ride or die. And they know I'm ride or die for them, so they're ride or die for me. The other thing is I've never, ever, business owners, especially small business owners, listen to this part. This is one of the main reasons I believe I have so much loyalty from like 25-year employees is because I have never, ever, ever thrown an employee under the bus. When something has happened in an outside, you know, our customer is like, oh, you know, and it happens, of course, because I don't work on everything. And, you know, it's like our customers don't know it. And they'll be like, hey, you know, your Timmy fucked this thing up or Lightning fucked this thing. I'm like, that's not how that works. That's not how that works. I fucked it up. Well, you didn't even work on it. It's not how it works. I fucked it up. It's impossible for my employees to fuck anything up because I am accountable for everything they do. Who has to pay? I have to pay. So that means that I am automatically accountable. Since I am the accountable person, right? You have no business saying anything to anyone that works for me. You want to come in here and raise a ruckus with someone that works for me, I will knock your fucking teeth out because I am the only person you're allowed to say something negative to ever. And I'll take that from you. You want to call me whatever you want to call me. You can do that. But you don't say shit to my employees. They're not accountable to you. I am. And I cannot tell you how many times Dave's Auto, I'll throw that motherfucker under the bus in a heartbeat. I watched him have a whole scandal happen, and his answer to that was to throw his employee under the bus. My employee didn't do what he was supposed to. What? If I worked for that man, I would have been out the fucking door. Even if it wasn't me that he was throwing under the bus, I would have left immediately. No way I'm working here. No fucking way in hell. No fucking way in hell. That's actually the only reason that I have no respect for that man. Dave's Auto. No fucking way. I watched him publicly throw one of his employees under a bus. Who's accountable for that engine that they ruined? That employee or Dave? I'm
the business and obviously the business owner because of it.
Dave.
Yeah.
So what business does he have throwing his employee under the bus? It's no different. And if my son, let's rewind when he was 8 years old. For the people that don't fucking understand it, if he threw a rock through your window, 8-year-old, are you going to go after him for restitution? No. Not only will you not go after him, I would rightfully stop you from going after him. No one would consider it ethically okay for you to pursue my son, 8-year-old son, to pay you restitution. And you wouldn't even try to anyway. You would go after me for restitution, even though I am not the one that did it, because I am the accountable party. So all these fucking business owners out there that shit on their fucking employees, and I'm talking all the way down to a guy making a burrito at Qdoba. It is not possible for him to make a mistake. That's how employees have to be taken care of. They have to know when they show up to work that the man in charge, the buck stops with him. He will never shit on them no matter what. No matter how bad they fuck up, he's accountable. He's the face. He never, ever throws them under a bus.
I think there's another side to that that's pretty important too. As a lot of employees will be like, oh, well, why does the fucking business owner, he makes so much money off the work I do? That is a huge part of it, is he is accountable for shitloads of things going on and has all this weight on his shoulders. And Of course, he had to start the business and all that, so that matters too. But you get to hide from all the hectic parts, the accountability and all that as an employee.
You get to hide from the cash flow problems. I still have cash flow problems to this day, right? Every time I expand a little bit, it's a cash flow problem always, right? And the guys that work for me get their check no matter what. Even when I'm eating fucking kidney beans out of a can, my guys get paid, right? They never suffer. They never suffer with me. They never have. I've never let them suffer with me, right? Not saying we haven't all had hard times, but they have never suffered because of their loyalty to me. And I have suffered much. And I do not have a guy working here that fucking that resents me for any of my success. I know it for a fact. And part of that is I make sure that my success is their success, right? However successful I am, like let's take Lightning for an example. There's been a time in my life when I was paying him $14 an hour. There's been a time in my life when I was paying him $68 an hour. And there's been a time in my life when I was paying him $35 an hour, right? And I just put that in order. Because however successful I was at that time, I compensated him accordingly. And he's always understood that. So now that he sees me coming into new success, he's excited. Because he knows what that means. He knows what that means. And so does everybody here, right? Like, as we've become more successful here, we've introduced a bonus program. I wasn't able to introduce a bonus program 9 months ago. Now we have a bonus program on top of the wage that they get paid. You know, if you're not permeating that success out into the guys that are helping you get there, you deserve that fucking resentment. Seriously, you deserve that resentment.
Yeah. That's true.
I'm not saying you owe it to them, right? I understand how hard it is as an entrepreneur to get to where you're going. But if you want guys that are going to fucking ride or die with you to the end, all the way down to the lowest employee, you share your success. And they will fucking ride or die with you to the grave.
What do you think the big issue is with shops? There's a shortage of techs, and I personally feel like it's because every shop is looking for master techs. They're unwilling to build people. What do you think it is that's holding guys back from growing because of employees?
Well, I mean, my answer 3 years ago or 4 years ago, well, I guess I better rewind faster than that. Let's just say pre-COVID, right? My answer pre-COVID would probably be dynamically different than now. But I don't think it's as much the problem that you're saying it is, because it permeates into every industry, and this wasn't a problem pre-COVID. So post-COVID, through COVID and post-COVID, you had the government astronomically ramping up their social programs where they're giving away money to everybody. Like literally, they've been giving people money, right? In fact, they gave everyone in the United States money, right? And so on and so forth. So we all know that kind of stuff doesn't work, and it immediately stagnates the economy as far as productivity goes. And I think we're still seeing the repercussions from that today, because if this was an isolated thing, you know, even if it was just isolated to labor-intensive industries or something, then I'd probably run with what you're saying. But it's endemic across all industries right now, even service industries and, you know, food and you name it, right? It's not isolated to shops or anything like that. So I know that's not the answer you're looking for, but that's too tough of a question in this current atmosphere to really answer, because it permeates everywhere across oil fields, you know, across diesel service industries, tugboats, you name it, right? You name it. And I think it's a coupling. It's a coupling of this ramping up of socialism, coupled with you have such a massive part of the workforce was told their entire lives that the only way they could be successful is to go to college and to get these, you know, non-blue collar jobs. And so, you have a doubling effect here where there's just nobody left to pick up the fucking spade and do the blue collar job. There's nobody left.
The Hack Nation stuff. I mean, you guys are at a point where, at least from my perspective, I see that you're pretty happy with where the shop's at. I don't think that you ever had a plan to have 50 employees in a 80 bay shop, so I think you're done there. But what about the Hack Nation thing? Is that just the next line of growth?
Yeah, so...
Hack Nation is your company, but what about the Hack Nation engine kits you're dropping?
So I have no intention of growing this shop any bigger than it is. And it's really because I can look at models like Fitzgerald, you know, where they got so big that their quality went away, and you know, their name is mud in the industry now. If you want to dispute that, ask around. You can't even say their name without somebody correlating it to garbage, right? Rightfully so. Be the first to say it. Rightfully so. So as far as my shop growth goes, we're done. We're not going to grow any bigger as far as capacity and employees and stuff like that. And we're just changing our visions to way bigger things. We all know that the reason that my shop is always 60, 80, 90, 100 trucks deep waiting to come into my doors is because of the endemic problem in this industry, which is, nationwide, the odds of you getting fucking absolutely devastated by a shop, because they're for, not every one of them, of course, but the mass majority of them are out of control, crooked, and just take advantage of everybody that comes through the door. That's why my parking lot's full. My parking lot is not full. Say it again, is not full because I am the best fucking mechanic to ever walk the earth. I am not Jesus Christ of mechanics. It's just not true. My parking lot is packed at all times for a much more embarrassing reason, and that is because the risk you run of getting fucked beyond belief and being absolutely destroyed by other shops is so high that guys are willing to drive all the way across this country and wait in my parking lot for 4 months just so I will do it so they don't get fucked. And I have this burning passion of fixing that. And I am super lucky because I've always safeguarded my reputation, including when I built my social media, that people view me as being America's most honest mechanic, and I live up to that name. I don't just try to live up to that name. I live up to that name as 100% as I possibly can within reason. And because of that, my popularity just keeps growing and growing, and it is pretty widely acknowledged at this point that I am viewed as the biggest, the most known mechanic in the United States. It's pretty much undisputed, coupled with also, if you look at our productivity, we are the biggest shop in the United States. Nobody's putting out a couple hundred engines a year, right? Especially not an independent mechanic shop like mine. And so because of that, to put it into layman's terms, right this minute, I am Michael Jordan of our industry. And like any time you have a Michael Jordan, you have your Nikes and Adidases and Pumas that want to come make a deal with you. And once I got to that point where I was having guys come here and talk to me about putting my name on their shit, I realized, well, that's not what I want to do with my life. That doesn't help anybody except for me. That's the only person that helps is me. I'll make a bunch of money. Well, let's face it, I'm not fucking broke. Right? And hardships don't scare me, right? So I'm not willing to do a cash grab and make a deal with someone so I can make a bunch of money. You're not going to see me on fucking TikTok peddling Beaver parts, right? It's not going to happen. Right this minute in time, I am wielding in my hand in an immense opportunity, an opportunity that I couldn't have dreamed into my hand. And that opportunity is I literally have a chance to change everything. I have a chance to do something different. And so as long as I don't get greedy and get bedazzled in any of that and just grab at the first shiny object that comes in my face, be calm, be collected, I can wield this to help everyone. And so that's what I've done. I decided to ignore Puma and Adidas and Nike completely. And instead, I went to Highway and Heavy Parts, who's not even an engine parts manufacturer. They are America's most trusted engine parts supplier, rightfully so. They're also the #1 engine parts supplier because they're the most trusted engine parts supplier. So who better to partner with, right? I want to partner with somebody that upholds this reputation that I have worked my fucking ass off to build. And so when I went to Highway and Heavy Parts, they're one of the few companies here that didn't come to me. I went to them and I said, hey, I talked to the owner, who's one of the most amazing people I've ever met in my entire life. And I said, hey, I have a vision. Can you help you? Are you interested in helping me with my vision? And, as well as I've come to know him now, I would have known in advance that he was going to say, hell yeah, right? He's just, he's a bigger dreamer than I am by far. So that's where we're going with it. We're doing something different here. We're going out, and we're doing acquisitions. We're testing products, and we are building our own product line that is not going to rival everyone. We're going to vastly surpass everyone. And our focus isn't the product, right? The focus obviously is partially the product. We want to have the best product, but that's not all we want to do. We want to change everything. We want to help guys with their social media. We want to help guys. We want to help bring guys exposure, maximize their success. We're putting together programs right now where we're gonna be able to offer you,
And when you're saying guys, what do you mean? Shop owners?
Yeah, shop owners, you bet. So I've already reached the hearts and minds of the truck stops, right? It's the shop owners where the disconnect is. My parking lot is full. That is because the hearts and minds of the truck stops know that I'm someone they can trust. The problem is they can't trust any other shops. That's the problem I want to cure, right? And I have an opportunity. If I have the best product, the best warranty, I'm helping you offer financing to all your clients. I'm helping you with your social media. We're just going to have this whole fucking package where we can take shops and elevate them to the level that I'm at. Then we can also have this quality control on all of that and help build a family of shops all over the United States that permeate this same honesty that we're putting out. They can offer so much more to their customers, and we can just heal this horrid fucking thing that we call the service industry for the on-highway and industrial use of diesel engines. It is the shops that have destroyed this relationship. It's not the end users, duh. It's not the owner-operators that have destroyed this relationship. It's the shops. And so if we can't figure out a way to heal this relationship between the shops and the end user, which is your owner-operator, we have failed. All we've done is thrown another fucking product at the market and smoke and mirrored everyone and tried to get everybody to jump on board with our product so I can go fucking buy a yacht in fucking the Bahamas and forget about all you motherfuckers. That ain't happening. That's not how we're going to do this. I mean, we're thinking so far outside the box. That's why I fucking love these guys so much. Andy and Rob and all those guys down there. When I'm meeting up with them, I'm throwing crazy ideas out there. For the first time in my life, I got them throwing crazier ideas back at me. What if we do this? What will that do for everybody? I'm like, yeah. So like right now, we're looking into. We're not just looking into. We're going to make this happen. We're going to start making our own blocks, because that's a problem. There's no new blocks being made. So it's just super refreshing. They're like, hey, what does this industry need? And now they're getting this fresh perspective from a guy that lives that side of life. And I'm like, well, you can't buy an injector that doesn't fail 10 days after you buy it. Well, what's the real problem there? Well, they're all reman. They're 25 years old, and so, you got the owner of Highway Heavy Parts. He's like, well, fuck it. Let's just start making an injector brand new. Well, to do that, you got to buy the rights to the casting, and you got to find a company that will cast you these, and then you got to do the finished machining. It costs a lot of money. It costs an insane amount of money, and you got to have a lot of vision. Guess what we're doing right now? Making brand new injectors, right? Making brand new injectors. Like, what does the industry need? Well, we need a turbo that doesn't fucking grenade. Okay, well, how do you do that? Well, I don't want to give away any trade secrets here, but there's certain things you can do. So what are we doing? We're developing a turbo. We bought a fucking turbo manufacturing facility across the border. We're developing a turbo. It's going to hit the market. It's not taking some other jackass's turbo and putting our name on it. This is the dream I wanted. This is the vision I wanted. And Andy and all those guys down there, they're just as on board. They're like, what does shops need? Well, the shop owner is out there turning wrenches. He's got his wife in there doing the books and not knocking them, Yeah, I'm a living example of that, right? But what do they really need? Well, they need a way to do projection. They need to know, what their cash flow coming is versus what their cash flow going out is and get their finances in order. It's one of the biggest failings of shops is their finances aren't in order, right? So we want to offer a program like, where they can do all that stuff that's tailored towards this industry. So we're like looking at it from every single angle. And this is the most exciting time in my life mainly because I resisted a cash grab. Because I wasn't willing to just grab cash and shit on everybody that I've ever known because I got to make some money, right? And I thank God that I've went through all I've went through to get to where I'm at. Otherwise, it's exactly what I would have done. I would have took my lottery ticket and fucking punched it and ran off, right? But that's not happening. I'm going to be in this for the long haul. We're doing big shit here, right? All of this is happening for me because I made a decision years ago when I started my construction company that no matter what happened, no matter what adversity came my way, I was always going to tell the truth and always do the right thing. And again, I really think that went back to the fact that I've been a fighter. My parents were like soccer moms, but for Taekwondo. I was in Taekwondo when I was this high. My parents were taking me all over the country, fighting in tournaments and this and that. And then when I moved out, I missed that a lot. So I started taking that passion and fighting in the ring. And when the UFC first started becoming a thing, you saw me jumping in cages, right? I was fighting in cages. I was boxing Thursday night. Every Thursday night I'm down there boxing dudes and making money. And I'm always fighting. And that just built this aura about me where I didn't have to worry about being shady to protect myself. I could be straight up with anybody all the time. And that permeated into my business model and has taken me to where I am today. Is I am not fucking scared of you. I'm not scared of me either. That's an important thing as well. I'm not as scared of me. I'm not as scared of my employees. I'm not scared of the outcome. All I have to do is do the right thing. If we fuck something up, I do the right thing. Big fucking deal. I just be honest with people. We fucked the truck up. I got to fix it. Yeah, I'm sorry you have 2 more weeks of downtime, but, at least I'm not going to fucking come up with some weird-ass reason why it's your fault that your truck's broken as it's trying to leave my parking lot, right? Or when I poured your foundation and the footer kicked out and I put $7,000 of concrete down the hill, and now I got to pay for $7,000 of concrete plus cleaning up this mess. I didn't come up with some fucking oddball reason why it's your fucking fault. I just fixed my problem, and never pushed off my mistakes onto my customers ever. Yeah, and it's because I don't care how mad that I don't have to. I'm not scared. I'm not scared of you. I'm not scared of anybody.
Well, there's a lot more to talk about, but we're going to have to do another podcast for that. We'll be back to Hack Nation again to dig into more of this stuff. But real quick, before we end it off, this is some value purely for you shop owners. To any shop owners watching this one's for you. We're going to do a rapid fire Q&A real quick. Just answer these questions.
Yeah, go.
Remotely quickly. This seems to be a great question for you. What do you think shop owners should do with bad reviews? Not really bad reviews, but customer complaints, problems. Does it go back to the honesty method? Just make sure you do right by everybody?
So, especially if you're on social media or something like that, one of the worst things that you can possibly do is try to hide people that are venting or complaining about you and stuff like that. I have a rule for myself that you can say anything you want about me, and I will not delete it. I will not take it down. The only time that I block people is if they're trolling me, and you guys have to understand the difference is if you're commenting on video after video after video, you're just trying to elicit a reaction from me, I will block you, okay? Because that's not somebody genuinely trying to vent a frustration. That is somebody that is just trying to troll me. So the most toxic thing you can do as a business owner is try and hide people that are trying to vent, and you create trolls when you do that because they never got to vent their frustration, and so they follow you, and they keep trying to do it, and they become this thorn in your side. Don't hide it. Here's the other thing. How are you going to grow as a human or grow as a business if you can never deal with the negativity, right? So when I have negativity, the first thing I do is evaluate whether their complaint's legitimate, right? If it's not legitimate, I might address it, but I'm certainly not going to take it down from the public's view and hide it. That's not going to happen, right? I might address it, and I might address it in the way that is favorable to their complaint, right? The only way that I can possibly do something negative to somebody is if they have a legitimate complaint and I try to bury it, right? So as long as you keep, my motto is to stay above reproach. My motto is not to be trampled on, and I won't be trampled on. You want to talk some dumb shit and lie about me, and guys do it all the time, Oh, one of my buddies, I just saw a guy comment, and he said, oh, one of my buddies, took an engine to them, and they lost his block, and they found a piece of shit that they welded together and gave him that one. That's a made-up story. That never happened, right? So the way that I address that guy is totally different than a guy's like, I took my truck there, and it was leaking oil afterwards, blah, 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 and that guy's probably has a legitimate complaint, and so that guy I would address in this manner. I'd say, hey, I'm sorry that happened to you, but I never saw a message from you. If there's something we need to take care of, let us take care of it. Even if it's at somebody else's shop, tell me about it, and I'll take care of it, right? And I will, right? I'm not going to hide from our problems. But like the other guy that is sitting here making up a story about me, my message to him is going to be a little different. I'm like, hey, that's not a true story. Why are you lying about me, And why don't you come here to my shop? I'll bounce your fucking head off the concrete. And seriously. If you're such a fucking coward, you're going to hide behind the internet and lie about me because you probably own a shop and hate me or whatever, fuck off, Making sure that you stay forthright and honest does not mean you have to get walked on. You understand? If a guy, and I can't control what happens to engines when they leave here. If a guy blows his engine up because he's doing something foolish, and he wants me to take care of it, and I feel like I shouldn't, I'm not going to. But I'm never going to make that evaluation based on this might hurt me financially. It is based entirely on, should I be accountable for this? And if I should, I always do the right thing, okay? And most of the time, and this is just a personal choice, if I'm not at fault, I usually figure out a way, especially if they're not being assholes to me, I usually figure out a way to help them solve the problem, and usually costs me a bunch of money to do it, but I try to meet them in the middle because my image is more important to me than an extra $5. It just is, right? But you have to understand that's a personal choice. I don't feel like that's something I have to do because it's not. You don't have to let people walk on you to have integrity. but you do have to have integrity, and you have to understand the difference. My integrity knows no bounds. If your truck put my business under because that's what it took to make you whole, this business is going away tomorrow. It's a fucking fact.
My next question is, what is one of the biggest mistakes that you see shop owners making? Not in the shop, like misdiagnosing engines or something like that.
Not being on social media, 100%. Not being on social media, not promoting their image, being scared of their own success, being scared that it's not going to work, using the tools that are around them to grow, to expand. In that tool in this day and age is social media. It won't always be, right? It always shifts. And as things become more saturated, human beings by default will gravitate away from them. So social media will not be the way that you get to where I'm at today, maybe a couple years from now. But right fucking now, it's on fire. And if you're not on social media, you are fucking irrelevant. You're fucking irrelevant.
What is one thing that you wish you knew earlier on in running your shop? Like, you started the shop, you did all these things, and you're here now. What's something you learned now you wish you knew then?
It's still something I don't completely have a lid on, and that is how to manage my finances, 100%. I believe that's probably the number one problem that most independent shops are having. I have always had a spending problem my entire life, and I've always solved my financial problems. I've always controlled my spending problem by directing that spending habit towards things that equal capital savings. And that's like paying my rent out a year, paying my lease out a year, paying my car payment out a year, and keeping it paid out a year. That satisfies my spending habit and directs it into capital savings, right? So that's how I've been able to cure my spending problem, is by focusing into capital savings in the long run, right? But I still have a problem. I still, I'm just like everybody else. They don't teach you that shit in school. Your parents don't teach you that shit. You really have to hire a CPA or something. And like everybody else, my wife's running the office. She's the best, but she's ill-equipped. She's ill-equipped for that type of stuff. And I'm out here turning a wrench and going to Michigan or going to Florida or whatever the hell it might be, and doing all this stuff. And of course, the thing that always suffers is your books. It's every business, pretty much, that that until they get to a certain point where you can just delegate out everything, it's everybody's problem. That's also part of what we hope to help everybody with. That's part of our plan, is to get some coloring book simple programs in place for guys that are dealers for us, to help them overcome that problem, so their wife can continue to do the job she's doing, and he can go out to the shop and continue to turn a wrench. We're going to try and help them from that respect. But that's probably the number one thing for every shop, including mine. I'm not immune.
So there's a lot of diesel shops, auto shops, all kinds of different repair shops on social media who are not doing well on social media. A lot of them suck at it really bad. What do you think the biggest mistake is that they make on there that causes them to never get big on social media?
And a lot of them give up as well. I deal with that here in my shop. So I know that social media is a really, it's a big thing. So anyone that works for me, I pay them 30, 45 minutes a day to develop their own social media. And a lot of them don't take me up on it. And most of the time, it's the guys that view themselves as being too fat or, not good looking enough and all that. But you have to like put yourself in the third person here, and realize that when you're scrolling social media and there's some guy you're watching, how he looks, his attractiveness is never part of a factor of why you're watching him in the first place, right? So, those things need to go out the window. You can't be self-conscious. Women get a huge following by using their bodies. Men, not so much. In fact, men, not at all, right? So, it's failure to put themselves in the third person and look at all that. But, you have to realize that, here's the thing, man. I am an exception. The couple of guys that are successful at social media like me are an exception. We're a 1%. Everybody wants to be famous. Everybody wants to blow up on social media, right? Some aren't doing it because they're shy. Some aren't doing it because they're self-conscious. Some aren't doing it because they just don't know how. And it's actually not that fucking easy at all, right? It looks easy, but it's not. Understanding how social media works is the main key. This word is thrown around nonstop. Algorithm. An algorithm sounds like this computerized entity that decides who's going to be successful. The algorithm is only one thing. It is us. The algorithm is you, it's me, it's Bob, it's Jim. We're the algorithm. And what that means is if we interact positively with a video, the computerized part of it will see that and continue to push it for people to view. But the algorithm, the thing that's deciding it's going to get pushed, is us. We're the algorithm. So the first thing you have to understand about social media is you don't get to decide what's a good video. I can't tell you how many times I put a bunch of thought into a video and I made the best video I've ever made, and it's a fucking turd. It doesn't go anywhere. Best video I ever made. Doesn't go in 1,000 views. And then I get my phone, I'm like, blah, 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 and I don't even edit it, and I don't even look at it, I just post it. 4.5 million views. Those are two true stories, by the way, right? I don't get to decide what's a good video. So it's more about just putting content out there, right? But quality content matters because you're after a narrative control. And so, like, even me, I'm hyper successful on social media. Even me, I hire a company. I hire Bennett Media. Of course, he's my son, but he also has a very, very successful track record. I hire him to develop all of my other social media platforms, right? So, like, when they were going to ban TikTok, right? Well, I was in a little bit of a panic because I was too dumb to, get on all the other platforms. I was always on TikTok and never cared. So all of a sudden, TikTok's going away. Whether it did or not, it was going away. And so I hired Bennett Media, and they got me like 40,000 followers on Facebook in, 90 days? Right? Sometimes you have to be willing to swallow some pride and have somebody help you out, right? It's like, sometimes things are too big for me. I'm really good at social media, do a good job myself, but I just hired you guys again to do a whole production with me with this thing I'm developing with Highway and Heavy Parts. I don't have the time to be 10 places at once, right? So you got to kind of look at where you're going with it, and put your money into the advertising that matters, right? You're better off spending any amount of money for your social media than you are spending $1 on a classified ad or a TV fucking commercial for that matter.
Or a billboard.
A billboard, any of those things. Nobody's watching fucking commercials on TV. They're on social media.
And nobody's watching billboards either. They're on their phone while they're driving.
I said that earlier. Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you don't believe me, look at the red carpet. The red carpet's covered with TikTok stars.
What about so there's a lot of shop owners who look at things, business owners in general, who look at things like the fact that everyone's on their phone while driving. And they don't see the billboards because of it, and they think, like, what imbeciles, like, which is true. Like, it's pretty pathetic that the world is that way now. And they don't like that everyone's on their phones all the time. So they don't want to put effort into building a social media following because they don't agree with that.
Nah,
what about that?
I doubt that, son.
No, I have a lot of guys tell me that.
That's their fucking problem. You have to understand that you're not accountable for other people's actions. I would never alter whatever I'm doing to enhance myself because somebody else might do something. Right? That's ridiculous. I'm not accountable for what people do outside of my scope of control. You know, there's only a very limited amount of people that I need to worry about that, and it's all of my children that are under the age of being viewed as accountable for themselves. End of fucking story. End of fucking story. There's only 3 people in this world right now that I'm accountable for at that level. It is my 9-year-old daughter, my 4-year-old daughter, and my 2-year-old son. Everybody else, including you boys, my older boys, I'm not accountable for you. Fuck off. So I'm not going to base my business model on something that somebody else might do somewhere. That's actually the same fucking argument that the gun control group is making, and you understand why that's fucked up.